lot of news stories have been written in the last several months about clearing in the derivatives business, a lot of news releases from clearing firms about how they're getting ready for new regulation and what's changing. What's been less discussed is the uncleared side of the business, and we're going to talk about that today and how that fits into the broader discussion of risk management and the risk culture. And joining me to talk about that is David Kelly, who's the Director of Credit Product Development at Quantifi. David, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So as I mentioned, first off, we're hearing a lot about clearing and what clearing firms are doing and this and that, but that's really, and certainly more products are going to be cleared as regulations take effect and whatnot. But there's the uncleared side of the derivatives business that doesn't get a lot of discussion. And I wondered if you can tell me, kind of from the work that you've been doing, what's happening there, what's that side of the business look like today?
Sure. Well, certainly we expect the clearing side to increase, although it's limited by what clearing houses are able to clear. So that's mostly standardized products. Mm-hmm. And in addition, both the Dodd-Frank and the EMIR regulations in Europe have special carve-outs for end users of derivatives, hedgers, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So the uncleared side will remain. How big that will end up being remains to be seen, but it'll certainly be a substantial portion of the derivatives market.
Okay, and when we think about the uncleared side and the cleared side, I mean, it's part of an overall pie that fits under the sort of rubric, if you will, of risk management. And we were talking earlier about some of the changes that have taken place at banks and companies around risk management and how people are thinking about risk management today, given the credit crisis and that sort of thing. And I wondered how, if you could tell us, how that's changing and how you've seen kind of the culture, if you will, change around that piece of it.
Yes, the culture of risk management is changing, most definitely post-crisis. In the past, banks were largely driven by front offices. As influential revenue generators, mm-hmm. We found that traders held a lot of authority and ownership of technology and resources. And so the systems were mostly desk-based, and if you had multiple desks and multiple systems, it was difficult to get a consolidated view of the risk. What we're seeing now is the culture is now more top-down, where the risk managers they take ownership. They say, we get our systems and we want to see a consolidated view of risk, mm-hmm. and it's up to the trading desk then to plug into those systems.
Okay, so that's an interesting way to look at it now from the top down. I think that gives us a great visual to understand how these big firms are kind of getting that holistic view, if you will, of risk. You mentioned the trading desk, David. I wonder if you could tell us about, because one of the keys in the derivatives business is the CVA desk, right, and what they've been doing and how that's changing as well. And can you sort of tell us a bit about, that piece of this puzzle?
Sure. In the past, counterparty risk was mostly managed using a reserve-based model, mm-hmm. where the bank would take some reserve and set it aside against counterparty losses. Relatively recently, although it's not necessarily a new concept, banks are now moving towards CVA desks. That's a specialized trading desk that sells credit protection to other trading desks and insures them against counterparty losses.
Other desks within the bank.
Other desks within the bank,
right.
That's right. So it's an internal function. And in turn, the CVA desk then attempts to hedge some of that risk.
Okay. Now, this change that we're seeing within these banks, are we seeing this kind of across the industry? I mean, the big money center banks in New York and the regional banks around the country, or is this something that is really only focused on the bigger banks that have more of the financial wherewithal to do these types of things?
Yeah, I think it's growing. Is the short answer. But the top tier banks have had these CVA desks. Some of them have had them for quite some time. Okay. Perhaps 10 years, mm-hmm. And they're refining them. CVA hedging counterparty risk is a difficult problem, and so there's continuous refinement of the analytics and mm-hmm. the ability to hedge some of the risk. The other banks, we're finding that in Europe, quite a few banks are now moving toward the CVA desk model. In other words, actively managing counterparty credit risk instead of just reserving against it.
Right.
And in the U.S., it seems to be a slower pattern, but it seems like that is now the accepted sort of state-of-the-art model, if you will, the CVA desk, and then some additional reserves.
Right. And is the point or the reason being that, again, it helps the management of the bank sort of understand the risk that the bank has overall in that part of the business? I mean, is that sort of that transparency, the clarity around how much risk they're at any given time?
Yeah, it gets back to the risk culture.
Right.
With this so-called top-down approach, counterparty risk is a portfolio level problem. It's not a trading desk level problem.
Right.
Interest rates, by contrast, is, let's say, a trading desk problem. It can be managed by the interest rate desk. But counterparty risk is firm-wide. So you need to have a centralized function that calculates the risk coming from all of these businesses, whether it's interest rates, FX, commodities, credit, et cetera. So it has to feed into a centralized function. Right.
Okay, interesting. Well, I think we'll leave it there. It's been a great discussion around risk management and how that's changed, coming out of the financial crisis, and with, as we mentioned, regulations in the United States and in Europe kind of changing the way clearing is looked at, and also how banks kind of try to get that overall view of risk that they're at any given moment. So thanks for joining us. My name is Greg Crawford. I'm the editor of TABB Forum. I'm joined today by David Kelly, who's Director of Credit Product Development at Quantifi.